I hope you are doing fine today. I just wanted to come on here because I have a thought, right? Or a series of thoughts that has just been playing around in my head. And I just want to share it. So bear with me as I verbalize, right? As I get it out of my head. So the discussion is around comparison, right? The language of compare, when you hear about comparison, people say don't compare yourself to others, don't compare yourself to others, as if comparison is a bad thing, right? And today I want to posit this, that it is quite possible, and I think I'm right on it, but I'm open to the conversation, that comparisons in and of itself is not a bad thing, right? It's what it leads to that really causes the problems and the issues that we sometimes have. Now, going back to English class, right? When we talk about comparisons, it's just a matter of looking at two or more things and noting the differences between them. So we use adjectives to note the similarities and difference between things. So we can recognize that one tree is taller than the other. We can recognize that today the sky is blue, yesterday it was less blue. We can look at cars and see that they are different colors. We can look at people and see how they are different. And so we compare. When we compare, it's just a matter of looking at, this is like this and this is like this. So all you do in comparison is that you just know differences and similarities between people and things, right? So looking at it from a people perspective, when you look at, all right, let's not start there. So when people say don't compare, I think the idea that they want to posit is that don't look at other people's lives and like wish it for yourself, I guess. Or don't look at other people's lives and you look at other people's lives and you feel bad about your own, etc., etc., right? I think that's the idea mostly that people want to communicate when they say don't compare yourself to others, right? But the truth of the matter is comparisons are important and comparisons are necessary, because one of the things that comparisons do is that it helps you to set goals, right? So let us say that you look at somebody who is more successful than you, or you deem to be more successful than you, right? And by looking at them and you recognize their success, you're also recognizing your lack of success, right? Is that bad? No, it's not a bad thing. But in recognizing the differences, you recognize also that you want this level of success that this person has. So you now set that as a standard, that this is what I want to aim for. And so you set goals and you make a plan to achieve that. That's how the comparison works, right? Or you see somebody who is more outgoing. If you're an introverted person, you see somebody who is more outgoing and you look at this person and say, wow, this person has traits that I actually like. I like how outgoing they are. I like how they can just go into the room and make friends with anybody. I like how they don't seem to have any issues with just talking and such. I would love to be a little bit more than that. So you compare yourself to this person and you recognize your lack, right? But you also recognize that this is something that I can work towards. And you put a plan in place, whether you can go to the person and say, hey, so say you go to the successful person and you say, hey, I recognize that you're doing really good in this area, and this area is an area that I'm interested in. Can you give me some ideas or some pointers in how to get there, right? And with the information, You can devise a plan and you can get there, plan on a timeline, and you can work towards that. You can go to the introverted person, or you can just look at them, look at how they behave, look at how they what they do in certain situations, and you can say, oh, okay, I can do that. So what I mean is that you don't have to necessarily go to them, but you can just look at their behavior and say, okay, I can do this, I can do that. I see when they come into a room, they don't just go to a corner. I see when they come in and they look around and they just go up to people and stuff, for example, right? So you can do those things, and that comes about because you compare and you recognize that the differences, and you recognize the similarities between you and who these persons are, or what they have achieved versus what you haven't achieved, right? And you can set goals based on that, right? We don't only compare yourself to people, you can compare lifestyle, right? Suppose you decide that in the next 10 years I want to own 3 homes. I want to have $50 million in the bank and another 100 million in investments, right? So that's a comparison, because it's pointing out to you a future that you desire and a present that you want to change, right? So you set the goal towards this thing that you desire, towards a future that you see for yourself, and you work towards it. So in that, comparison is actually quite helpful, right? The problem that I think in comparing ourselves to people, and this is the part that I'm actually trying to work out, so bear with me, right? So the problem, I think, in comparing ourselves to people is when the comparison seemingly attacks the self. It's when the comparison looks to who you are at your core, your values, your beliefs, your traits, and deem them less than. So it attacks your identity of who you are, right? So going back to the example of this successful person that you compare yourself to, and you see where you lack, and you want to work towards this thing, right? So you can do the first one that we spoke about earlier, where you can say, okay, this person is successful, I am not, but I can get here. How do I get here? How do I bridge that gap, right? Or sometimes what happens is that you see this successful person, and because you're not there, then the thing that comes is, what's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. I'm less than, I'm this, I'm that. And you just start attacking who you are. You start attacking your values. You start attacking your personality. I'm not as outgoing, and it's one thing to say, oh, I'm not as outgoing as this person, but it's another thing to say, woe is me, I'm not outgoing, and it's a critically bad thing that I'm not outgoing. So it becomes a critique. It becomes a negative critique of who you are. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. So it's nothing wrong with seeing your lack. Then it's nothing wrong with seeing where you're lacking and ways you can do better. But when you can recognize your lack and identify behaviors that are actually leading to that lack, things that you can change and work towards that change, that's good. But when you see your lack and then it becomes something that something that destroys you, something that tells you that you're not as worth as much as this other person, something that tells you that there's something wrong with who you are as a person, that kind of thing. You understand what I'm saying? So if the comparison attacks and diminishes your sense of self, that's the issue, I believe, right? But if you can compare and still leave yourself intact, right? I think that is what we should all aim for. So the difference, I believe, is that in comparing yourself and deciding to work towards a goal, you're still elevating yourself because you think of yourself as having the ability to achieve these things, right? But when you attack yourself and diminish yourself with the differences that you're seeing, then it becomes a thing that I am just not worthy. Me, Elise McFarlane, or whoever you are, I'm just not worthy. I don't have the ability to do these things because there's something inherently missing. There is something inherently wrong. And it's one thing, attacking a set of behaviors is one thing, but because you can change behavior. But when the issue becomes an attack on yourself, your core, who you are, as a person, the question then becomes, how do you change your core? It's easy to change a behavior, but to change who you are, it's easy to say something is wrong with something that you do, how you act, how you say things. That's one thing. But to come and believe that there's something wrong with who you are as a person, your makeup, your beliefs, whoa, that's a different attack. So I hope you're really understanding, what I'm trying to say, right? So don't let the comparison diminish your value. Don't let the comparison diminish your worth. Compare yourself, because all you're doing is seeing the differences and similarities, right? But always find a way to, um, you have to get to the place where you believe that, yes, we're different. Yes, this is where I'm at, and but this is really what I want, where I want to be, and I'm able to get there because I am capable. I have the ability, I have what is necessary to get here, right? So you empower yourself with the comparison, because the truth of the matter is, things like success is something that anybody can achieve, right? And we can get into the whole idea of what people deem successful, but truth of the matter is, success is not relegated to one group of people or one type of person. No, right? Somebody who's introverted can learn how to be extroverted. And one of the things, right? Um, here's another thing. So in the comparison, right? And while you're aiming for a goal, the aim is not to become this person, right? Because then you lose yourself, right? The aim is not to necessarily do things as this person did them, right? The aim is not necessarily to make friends and build relationships like the extrovert, for example. You have to aim to not to lose yourself. So you have to find a way that, even though you are working towards being, because you've used the examples before, being more successful or being more extroverted, right? Because you're aiming towards these things, it doesn't mean that you have to become this person. It doesn't mean that you have to do everything as this person did it. And the idea is that even in working towards this goal, you have to find your own path and still be true to yourself. Let's say, for example, let me see, what example can I use? Let's use an example from my life, right? So coming into this career as a financial advisor, right, working with Sagicor, I can say that the person that I was a couple of years back when I just started is quite different from the person that I am now. I have grown so much, right? Coming into this career, there are certain things I was like, I'm looking at other persons and I'm like, wow, how are they like that? I could never do that. I could never be like that. And in saying that, I was identifying these traits as ideals, right? As goals, because these persons being this way are actually helping them to succeed in the career. So I'm looking at these persons who are succeeding, who are doing well, and I'm seeing what they're doing. But for me, that was just that was impossible. And I'm wondering to myself if I'm in the right career, right? But at the end of the day, I saw these ideals, I saw these behaviors as ideals and things to work towards. And so after a while, I started allowing myself to be a little bit more like who these persons are. Um, so um, not being afraid to talk to people. That's for me. That's one of my that's a hard thing for me to do, right? Just talking to people, conversations, and well, conversations for me are awkward. I find social interactions, if you're a stranger, social interactions are awkward for me. They're the most awkward thing to be just talking completely to strangers. Just it's just awkward. It's just awkward when I'm married. That's my husband and I first started talking. He used to do all the talking. I was just quiet and I would just listen. And so coming into this career of sales, basically, where you have to talk to people, it was challenging, right? But I knew that this is something that I had to do. This is something that I had to get away from. And so I see these persons who are succeeding, and I'm seeing the different behaviors. One of them being their ability to just talk to people. You see, for me, when I'm talking to persons, in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, what do I say next? Where do I go next? Did I just say the wrong thing? Oh my God, if I say this, they're going to feel away. What if I say this? And then I turn them up. It's a whole circus in my head when social interactions. So I've always been the type of person, it's like I measure my words. I'm very careful with my words. Sometimes I talk slow because in my mind I'm trying to find the right words to say. I still believe in the importance of being careful with what you say and how you say it. So sometimes I'll be talking to somebody and I'm like, I'm gonna say something to you and I don't want you to be offended, right? So I preempt them even before I say, because I believe in the power of words. I believe in the power of words to change lives. Words can break you, but words can build you. And so I measure my words, and I've always been anxious about how I speak. So that's me, right? So I've had to learn to step out of that and put the anxiety to the back of my head. So I've had to learn to just let conversations flow. And that's challenging for me, right? Now, in working towards that ideal of being more comfortable in talking with persons, right? In working towards that ideal, one of the things that I recognize is that I still have to hold on to who I am at my core and my belief system that says words are power. So you still have to be careful. So even though I have become much better in having a conversation with persons, and the anxiety that I usually feel is more to the back now, right? I still, I'm still me, right? I'm still careful in what I say. I'm still, I still try to be purposeful in what I say. right? Sometimes if a thought is running around in my head, I'll just be, I might find myself talking slow because I want to get the thought out properly and I want people to understand and get what I am saying without conflict or anything like that. So I'm still me at my core, but I've become a better conversationalist. And because I've become a better conversationalist, I'm growing more towards the success that I'm seeing in other persons, to the ideal, right? So I'm adjusting, I'm changing, I'm working towards the goal. And it all started because I compared myself to the successful people. I deemed the behavior and what they have as being important. And I took a step back. I looked at myself and say, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. This is what I want to get at. Right? It's an ideal. And I looked at myself and said what I needed to do differently. What about me that's not working? And what do I need to change, or what do I need to adapt? What kind of behaviors I need to adapt, or mindsets? Because I also had to take a look into my mind. So when the anxiety comes, I push it back, you know? So changes had to be made so that I could get to the goal. But at the same time, I'm still me at my core, because I still believe in the power of the words that you speak. And so you might find people who will just say anything. That's not me, right? Or I try not to be that person, I should say. I try not to be that person. So I think that's what I want to say, you know? It's okay to look at other persons. It's okay to look at other persons and see, you know, where you measure up, right? We do that as parents as well. We look at another, I'm female, so let's start from the female perspective. We look at other mothers and we look at their children and we say, wow, I'm sleeping because the AC is on, all right? So we look at other females and we say, and we look at their children and they become an ideal in our head. Like, this mother is seems to be doing so well. What can I do, you know, to get to what she's doing? Her children are so well behaved and all of that. And sometimes we look at the mother and her children, and we look at ourselves and our children, and it's so easy to get into the idea that, oh, I'm a bad mother because my children are not behaving like that, right? And that's what we don't want to do. We don't want the comparison to attack ourselves, our identity, or worth, right? So you look at the behavior. Okay, this mother seems to have her children under control. At this point in time, I don't have my children under control. What can I do, or what can I stop doing to have my children under control? And you can go to this mother and say, hey, your children are well behaved. What do you do? And you can have a conversation with her. Or you can watch from a distance and see what she's doing. I like the idea of going to the person and saying, hey, what are you doing that's getting this result? Because I find this result to be ideal. Because in talking to the person, you can find out more than just observing. Let me give you an example. I've always seen my husband as a confident person. He's an extrovert. He can talk to anybody. And whenever he has a plan in his head, he just goes. In fact, I don't think, I tell him sometimes don't plan much, right? He just gets a thought, he has an idea of what he wants to do, and he goes, right? He just, whoop, he goes after it. And that's something that I've always admired, because I'm the opposite. I would talk myself out of doing stuff. So in talking to him, one day I sat and I spoke with him, and we're talking about the whole issue of how he just gets up and go. Literally, he gets something in his head and he'll just go. In fact, he hates planning. He really does. But I'm the planner. But sometimes I will outplan the decision. So I'll have something in my head and I'll overthink it so much that I don't do it. So you can imagine how me as that type of person can look at him and say, whoa, I'd love to be a bit more than that. And we had a conversation. And one of the things out of the conversation that came to me was that let me give you this part first. So one of the things why I'll outthink myself out of a situation, or I'll overthink myself out of a decision that I've made, is that a part of it is that I'm afraid. I'm scared. So I'll think of every possible reason why it is that this thing will fail, and then I don't do it. Right? I am an overthinker, and that's something that I've had to work on. Not necessarily to get out of the overthinking, because the truth of the matter is I think there's benefits in being an overthinker. And that's just another thing. Let me address this. That's another thing, right? I've had to learn. I'm an overthinker. And you think that being an overthinker is a bad thing. It has its bad things. It has a bad things about it, but actually being an overthinker is a good thing. So you ever hear them say, don't throw out the baby with the water, right? So I think overthinkers make very good planners, because we have the capacity to think about practically every possible outcome. We have a lot of what ifs in our head, right? And that in and of itself is a good thing. So we make very good planners. We make very good organizers. So I think there's good with me being an overthinker. I'm a very good planner, right? I love admin stuff. That's me, right? And I find that when I jump into that aspect of myself, of my overthinking, I can make it work for me. And I will have a goal that I've worked towards go more smoothly, because we can think about the good, but also we can think about all the bad things that can go wrong, and there's nothing wrong with that. What I've had to do though is I've had to can I talk to myself? I've had to tamper down with it sometimes, because one of the things is that I'll be like, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? And I say, all right, what if it does happen? What do you do? All right, if this happens, I'll do this. What if this happens? Okay, if that happens, I'll do that. So instead of just going under, and what I would usually do is just go on a spree. Right? What if that happened? What if that happened? What if? And so I talk myself out of it, right? But one of the things two things that I do actually. One, I answer the what if. I want to go across the street and buy a bag juice. I see a bag juice that I want, and I'm going over there to buy a bag juice. Okay. What if going across the street you get hit down by a car? What if you come out of your car and you forget to close the door and somebody comes thief it? Literally, guys, this is sometimes some impossible situations come up, or improbable situations come up. What if on the way you drop your money? What if? And I just let it stay like that, and then I decide that I'm not going to buy the bag juice. But what I do know instead is that sometimes what if you go across the street and be careful and your car hit you down? All right, that means that I need to be if anybody knows what the car just said, that would be good to know. I have no idea. Anyways, so I answer the what if. What if you get lit down? Then I know that when I'm going across the street, I need to look carefully. What if you leave the car and somebody comes thief it? All right, then before you go, make sure that the cars are locked properly, etc., etc., etc. Right? So I answer the what if. Another thing that I do though is that I just act in spite of. I just get up and go. Just like my husband, I just get up and go. I want the bag juice, money, get, go. I ignore the what if. So sometimes I answer them, sometimes I ignore them. So that's how I've dealt with my overthinking. That is how I'm dealing with my overthinking, because it still happens sometimes. But anyway, back to the main point. So I had a conversation with him, right? So I had a conversation with him. And one of the things that came out of the conversation, I remember I said one of my issues was fear. What he said to me that kind of just, I was like, oh. He said to me that he gets scared too, or something to that effect. And I was like, really? So you contend with fear as well. So what do you do in face of the fear? And his response is that he does it anyways. Oh, guys, if you're like me, if you can relate to some of the things that I've said about my personality, you can understand why this hit me so much. Because in my mind, he's a go-getter. He just gets up and go. Nothing stops him. He's not afraid of anything. Only to recognize that, yes, the concern is there, but what? He ignores it and just does it anyway. Right? So that was a kind of turning moment for me. And then I started knowing that fear was always involved. The possibility of failure was always involved. But he still got up and go. I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. It's not that he's without fear. It's just that he does it even in spite of. I'm like, okay, I can do this. So talking to him actually opened up opened up that way of thinking for me, that way of being for me. However, remember I said that one of the things that you can't lose yourself. You can't lose your core. You can't lose who you are, because I'm still a planner and I still believe in the importance of planning. So I incorporate it in the getting up and go. I'm still going to have a plan. I'm still going to have a plan. More likely than not, I'm still going to have a plan. I'm learning little by little, just get up and go on some things. But on some things, I'm still going to have a plan. On some things, I'm going to think it out. So the aim is not to become him. The aim is to achieve the behavior. And the behavior is that he's a go-getter. He just gets up and go. Right? The aim is to achieve that behavior, but still being true to who I am. And I am a planner. And there's nothing wrong with that. I am a planner, and there's nothing wrong with that. What will happen is that once those two things are merged, the plan and the action, I'll find that the probability exists that I'll have more success than him. Right? So you can't lose yourself. So while you're attaining the ideal, and the ideal came from the comparison, right? While you're achieving that ideal, don't lose yourself. Work towards the behavior, right? Work towards the goal. If the goal is to become more extroverted, if the goal is to become more successful, but find your path. Find your way to get to it, and keep who you are, because who you are is important. Who you are is who you are. Being yourself is #goals, not being anybody else. You emanate the behavior, you emanate the traits that you see, but you're still to the core who you are, right? So it's okay to compare yourself to people. It's okay to do that, right? But don't let the comparison become an attack on your self. Don't let the comparison make you feel as if you're less than, you're not worth it, right? The comparison, all it needs to do is to tell you where you're lacking. The comparison makes you realize that there's still some things to work on, and that's actually a good thing, right? I don't think you ever want to reach a place where you feel like say you reach, because that makes you that makes it so that you're not teachable. And one of the things that we must always be is teachable, right? Once you're teachable, you can grow. If you reach a place where nobody can tell you nothing, then you stop being teachable. And right then and there, so growth stop, right? So allow the comparison to tell you what you're lacking. Allow the comparison to tell you that there's more to achieve. Allow the comparison to tell you that you can be better. But don't let it tell you that you're less than or you're not worth it. If you want to be successful, learn from successful people, right? If you want to be an extrovert, more extroverted, do that, right? Learn from extroverted persons, right? If you want to be a better parent, it's okay to look and say, oh, this person is a better parent than me, or I deem them a better parent than me. How can I work? What can I learn from this person, right? And you know, you'd be very surprised. You might go up to that mother and you said to her, how you get your children to stay so quiet? And you'd be surprised of her response. Sometimes we judge people in a vacuum, like in one setting, and we think that they're all and be all. You know, sometimes we do that, and that's not necessarily a good thing to do. You can't just look at somebody in a vacuum and say, wow, hashtag goals. And we do this a lot with celebrities, you know, hashtag goals. We look at their relationships and we're like, hashtag goals. And we make the people the ideal. Don't make the person the ideal, because you really don't know what's going on in their lives. Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith, for example, they were hashtag goals for a long time. Like, I want a relationship like that. I want a relationship like that. And wanting a relationship like that, or what we deem is happening in their relationship, that's what people wanted. They wanted a man or a woman that loved them like that. They wanted a man that looked at them like how Will Smith looked at Jada Pinkett Smith. They wanted a family that seems intact, that was intact and all of that. So people were looking at this couple, and you know, they were hashtag goals because they seemed to have it, and the it is the behavior that people were hashtag goaling. But then when recent events came out, a lot of people were devastated, and a lot of it became, oh, if Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith can have that, then who am I to have that? And we can't do that. Keep the goal, keep the behavior. What you liked was the behavior based on what you were seeing. So idolize the behavior. Set the behavior as the ideal, not the person. When the person becomes the ideal, right, that is when you look at yourself and you think that there's something wrong with you, because you're comparing the person to yourself, and they are the ideal. And also, when this person fails, it might crush you. So separate the person from the behavior. Sometimes you have to learn to do that, right? And aim for the behavior. Aim for the thing that is making this person successful. Find out what is this person doing that is making them successful. Find out what this mother is doing to make her kids behave in what you have deemed an ideal behavior. Find out what makes this person so outgoing, because you deem the behavior ideal, right? So that's what that's what I want you to focus on. Focus on the behavior, not the person, right? Not the person. Focus on the situation, not the person themselves. And that way you also protect yourself. And in this I think it's important to keep yourself, your identity intact, your value intact. And know that you can. When you focus on the behavior, you start to realize that you can. When you focus on the situation, you believe that you can, because situations can change easily too. Sometimes not, but sometimes it's quite easy to change a situation. Mindsets can change. So focus on that. But don't make the person a pinnacle. Find out what you like about the person. I think the conversation is becoming full circle. Find out what you like about the person. What is the behavior that is drawing you to this person, that is making you think of this person as being hashtag goals, or the situation as being hashtag goals? And work towards that. Set goals to achieve that. Right? So, yeah, I think that's it. I think that's what I have to say on that matter. And I think I came full circle with that one, right? I think I came full circle with that one. So, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you think that I was talking around the bush, or if you think I was what I said was foolishness, or if you think it makes sense, feel free to comment. I'd love it if you leave a like and share, But let me know what you think. Comment down below. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.